Hey everybody, welcome back to 7 Billion Geniuses. A lot of people have asked me where I came up with the idea to do this book, and it really originates back in some things that I've learned over time, some things I learned several years ago, and they all string together to get me to a place where I think it's really important to reintroduce this idea that we're all special and that there isn't just a select group of people in our culture that are special and others that aren't. And so I thought today I'd just lay out actually the whole trajectory that's got me where I am today in terms of my thinking. And everything I'm about to tell you, none of it's original to me. It all comes from a variety of different sources. It's all easily available. If you want to fact check any of what I'm about to tell you, you certainly can. There's plenty of sources that support what I'm about to tell you, and you can do all the searching that you're interested in doing to corroborate what I'm going to tell you. But the story of 7 Billion Geniuses goes back 11,500 years ago, where agriculture began. And it began in an area of the world that's called the Fertile Crescent, somewhere between Iran and Iraq in the Middle East. And for some reason, the people who lived there thought that it was a good idea to start to farm. And as a result, you can see the grain reserves, the grain stores that are there, the actual architecture of the facility that they used. It's very small, but archaeologists agree that that's where agriculture began, and 11,500 years ago is when it began. And you might say, why is this important? Well, the reason why it's so important is because what it led to was specialization. And specialization meaning that there are certain people that do certain things and other people that do other things. Prior to that, we were hunter-gatherers, and as a hunter-gatherer species, that didn't mean there were some people who hunted and some people who gathered. What it meant was that we lived off the land, and we were connected to what the land and the earth was doing. What it had to offer us was what we had to use. And if it didn't offer us anything, then we didn't have anything to use. And people would starve at times, and it would be bountiful at times. But we lived in the flow of what the earth offered to us. And so by taking up agriculture, it radically shifted our relationship to the earth. So that's a part of the process, the radical shift in our relationship to the earth. The other part that more directly ties to the 7 Billion Geniuses process, the reason why I wrote the book, is about specialization. So why does specialization come up? Well, if somebody's going to spend their time planting seeds and harvesting, then somebody else is going to have to make the tools that they use to harvest whatever it is that they've planted. Somebody else is going to have to, and ultimately another major shift happened because of agriculture in the context of documentation, in the context of writing, in the context of what was written down and why. And those had profound effects on memory and what we as a culture choose to pay attention to and try to memorize, and what we actually don't, what we write down. But back to specialization, because that's really the focus of this trajectory that's so important. As we move forward as a culture, and somebody was planting and harvesting, and somebody was building, and somebody was counting, and somebody was making tools, and somebody was making glass, this evolution of specialized culture starts to happen. We're moved into places as a community where one of us is doing one thing and one of us is doing something else, and we're no longer able to do many different things, things that respond to the specific needs that we have. We become reliant on other people in ways that are different than we were reliant on other people before. Prior to agriculture, we were reliant on each other for support and caring and love and community. And we were able, because of the way we were living, to provide a fair amount of that, just because we were generally around each other, we were generally doing similar things, we were certainly working towards specific, similar goals. After agriculture, if I was the barrel maker, I had to focus on making barrels, I had to focus on selling barrels, I had to focus on getting the resources necessary for making my barrels. And resources is a major issue in the context of all this. If you can imagine responding to the earth and the earth responding to us as we walk through a way of living that's simply about that relationship. Resources are what they are. We use what we have, and we're grateful for what we have access to. In an agricultural context, land is extraordinarily important, and the more people you have, the more land you need. Prior to agriculture, communities of people didn't war because of lands. They didn't need to. We had what we had, and we used what we had, and it was part of our relationship. And that relationship also affected the number of people who were needing resources. As food became more abundant and available, population could go up almost infinitely to the point that we're above 7 billion at this point, as is reflected in the title of the book. But what's important about that is that the amount of food space that was necessary to create the amount of food that was necessary grew and grew and grew, and required that the arable land, the usable land, the land that could actually produce food, became very much more, got much more attention than it did before. I'm avoiding the idea of value because ultimately that's what it gets to, is that we move away from land being something that we participate with into something that is a thing, something that becomes valuable, and without it, we can't continue the process that we're in the context of agriculture. We have to get more land from others. That creates conflict. That creates value, where buying and selling of land starts to be a thing, and it starts to put us in a position of conflict that's new, that had never existed before. And so we have the evolution of conflict, we have the evolution of specialization, and the evolution of specialization ultimately is what gets us to the idea that there are certain people who are good people, who are useful people, who are capable people, and there are other people that aren't, all based on these now specialized capacities, these things that we're supposed to be able to do, that grow out of the needs of the system, which is about agriculture, specialization, and industry, as opposed to simply looking at our existence as wonderful because we exist. Now that seems circular, but in a way, it's not in the most important way. Specialization suggests that certain people are special because of what they can do. That's in the context of a culture that says these things are the things that need to be done. The circular image of you're special because you exist exists prior to industrialization, prior to industrial agriculture, that the fact that you have arrived is something to be celebrated. And once celebrated, what you do next is also magnificent and amazing. And so you are recognized because you are here, you're recognized because you have a unique contribution, because you are you. So really, I say many times in 7 Billion Geniuses that really what I'm talking about is a return to a way of thinking about each other in the context of the technology and industry that we now have, but that recognizes our specialness, and that doesn't ask us to give that up in the service of a specialization that you may or may not be in agreement with. The idea that some things are special, some specific defined group of things are special and others aren't, might not be something that you're particularly in agreement with. And if you're not, I'm saying that you can make that choice. I'm saying that you can make the choice about whether or not you think your specialness in relation to the hyper-specialization that we now live with as a culture is something that you're down with, is something that you're in agreement with. I'm not, and I'm very much standing for, in the context of these videos and this book and everything that I'm doing these days, I'm standing up for the idea that your existence is important because you exist, and that it is a manifestation of the complexity, the infinite complexity that is this cosmos, and therefore is extraordinarily important. The contribution that you have to make because you are you, because you exist, is extraordinarily important. So that's the basic idea. There may be some details that I will fill in later on, but for now, I'm going to leave it at that. That really the beginnings of agriculture has put us on this trajectory. That hyperspecialization is a part of that trajectory, and that from that specialization comes the idea that certain people are to be prioritized and lauded and respected, and other people aren't. And that simply a simple move away from that idea, based on a belief that I carry and that I'm sharing with you and that you might take up as well, that our existence, the fact that we are born, is what makes us special, and that we have each a unique contribution to make because we exist, that would be a transition that would really change the way we think about many things. So thanks for taking the time. Do stay in touch. All my contact information will be at the end of the video. Please call me or email me. If you'd like a copy of the book, I'm happy to send you one. All you have to do is ask. And I'll see you next week.